however many Philadelphias there are, I want to grow the best one. I mean, there's one particular one which I think is called Casa Azul, which was a naturally occurring hybrid on your nursery, for instance. To me, it stinks of bubblegum, but everybody else says, oh, what was that scent? It's absolutely fantastic. It's fabulous.
I agree. I agree with you. It occurred as a spontaneous seedling in the garden.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, look at that little Philadelphus there. Wow. And I thought, if that's a seedling from one of my plants, I was only growing these rare Mexican species in the garden. And I thought, it's either a seedling from one of these or it's a hybrid. And this could be interesting. I do a lot of woody plants, as people probably realize. I do a whole range of everything, of course. But my heart was originally with trees and shrubs. So this, I don't know if you can see that. This just looks like a pine, doesn't it? This is a pine. This is a young pine. And these are quite long needles, I think you can see here.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like as long as they'll get when they're getting on with it a bit. After just a couple of years of growth, this is only a baby in a 2-litre pot. You see, it's not very big. What is that, about? I don't know, 18 inches tall at the moment. This is Pinus engelmannii from Mexico, which is very rarely grown in the UK, but really should be, because it's proven over many, many years to do really well, certainly in the south. But I mean, I don't think hardiness is really an issue with it. Full sun plant. These needles get ridiculously long. So you end up with, how do I do this? Between the knees, you end up with a beach ball of foliage on every branch end. So it's just an incredible foliage plant, or tree, should we say? But it's not like a mega fast growing huge tree. The largest specimen in Britain is at the Hillier Arboretum, not far from Jermyn's house. And it's not huge. And it's probably, I'm guessing it's probably about the same age as the Arboretum itself, which must be heading for something like 70 years now. So it's been in the ground quite a long time. And it's not a massive tree at all compared to some pines. But there used to be this specimen over in what is, if anyone knows the Hillier Arboretum, it's in what is the winter garden now, the huge winter garden, stuff grown for winter interest. There used to be a specimen there which they built the winter garden around, and that one was much better to look at because the branches came right down to the ground. It was much younger, it wasn't so tall at all, and the branches came right down to the ground, and you could get your hands around these, your arms around these great beach balls of foliage. If anyone wants to see pictures of that tree, just go to my website and punch in Pinus engelmannii, Engelmann, German name, and you'll see that specimen. That smaller specimen is now dead and gone for I don't know what reason, but it was great. And I always wanted to grow this tree. I just thought that is foliage par excellence. And I always wanted to grow it, and it was never available anywhere. And in recent years, some of us have been able to get hold of seed of this species and grow it and offer it, which has been absolute highlight of my life, really, to be able to offer this kind of quality tree. So that's and I've actually seen it in Mexico back in 2008-9 winter. I went over to Mexico for my something like, what was it, fourth trip, I think, there. And we saw them in the wild in Durango state. Again, pictures on the website of that. You'll see them there. But it's a stunner. And of course, fully drought tolerant for future dodgy summers.
Lovely. Now, this is going to be a strange observation, but personally, I like a plant that looks like it could have little googly eyes on it, or, be a cast member of something like Monsters, Inc. And that, to me, feels like a Monsters, Inc. type plant. It looks like a kind of creature.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
animate it. And
yeah. It's definitely not your average specimen in the garden. Next, sticking with the woodies, this is one I think we need to rave about. This is a tree, again, that doesn't get too big at all in the UK. I don't know if you can see these. This is, again, it's only a baby in a pot, so these aren't typical leaves at all, actually. This one's starting to get a bit more shape. But this is, I grow this in the ground here. See that green stem? That's relevant. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. This is Firmiana simplex. I think it's a member of the Sterculiaceae family from memory. So this is an Asian tree. I don't know how big it gets over there, but certainly in Britain, hardly anyone grows it. And the people who do find it doesn't get very tall at all. So mine has been in the ground for the entire time I've been on this site. So I've been here 21 years in Frampton. And I planted one of these at about something like 6-7 feet tall. And it has grown absolutely perfectly, despite most people thinking it's a tender tree. And so, of course, my tree then went through the terrible winters of 2009-10, where I recorded at least -14 Celsius, and we had those 3-week freezes, absolutely frozen solid, and it didn't even have tip damage. The buds were absolutely untouched. You think, well, that's not tender, is it? And when you actually read about it, it's not really likely to be tender either. So it's just had this reputation sort of built from nothing, really, regarding its hardiness. And there's also this idea, harking back to what we were talking about earlier on, about heat and ripening of growth, and plants being, happy in our climate and able to overwinter an average winter. So it's true to say that this in the wild would have a much, much hotter climate on a daily basis during the summer. It would have quite cold winters in many places where it grows, possibly much colder than ours even. But it has that ripening of the growth, and you could say that might be relevant to the UK. But even through our coolest summers, of which it's had a few, it doesn't grow so strongly in our cool summers like this last one and this one. It's not exactly pumping out the growth, but it's perfectly happy. Absolutely perfectly happy. So I think we should be growing Firmiana more. And my plant in the ground could get these great big deeply lobed leaves. So it's a great foliage plant. The flowers are it's in bud now in the garden. The flowers are these kind of creamy beigey sort of color, not that exciting but interesting. It's really the foliage you're growing it for. But also when it's young, just to go back to the earlier point, the stem for quite a few years remains green, which is in combination with these big funky leaves, gives it a really tropical look. So you don't really get that combination in any other plant that I could think of that we can grow in the UK. So I think Firmiana simplex needs a bit of a shout out, because very few people grow it, and people should grow it, especially in the whole sort of southern portion of the UK and possibly even further north. I mean, it'd be interesting to know if anyone else is growing it well north of Birmingham. I don't know. They probably will. I don't see why not, because I would be southern UK, so we do get reasonable warmth in the summer, let's face it. But it would be really interesting to test this, especially with climate change, as things warm up just that slight bit, Yeah. Maybe there's one in Edinburgh Botanic Garden. Who knows?
Have you got this, Alan?
No, I don't think I do, but the name rings a bell, so I'm not sure.
If you don't, you must have one, Alan.
Yeah,
You've got the space. Yeah.
It's a very East Ruston plant.
Yes, absolutely. And where I have it in the garden, I have a lot of Tetrapanax, papyrifer rex around it, which again has these fabulous deeply lobed leaves. And I also have do you know Napaea dioica? No. Which is it's a funky Malvaceae family from North America. So it's bone hardy perennial. It has these tiny little heads of little malva flowers, which aren't that exciting, but I'm growing it for its really good foliage, which again is palmate foliage, and all three of these together visually tying in with each other. It's a nice sort of touch, I think. More foliage. Anyone recognize this yet? It's a what?
I said it looks like a sage.
Well, it does look like a sage. It's a Phlomis,
Ah,
Ah,
so it has sagey leaves. This has incredibly golden yellow hair on the undersides, and also on the top rough of foliage there. But and underneath, some of these other leaves are sort of grey green with grey green petioles. The whole thing is covered in hair. So this is Phlomis bourgaei. Bourgaei. Must be a Frenchman or woman who found it originally. So this is from southwest Turkey. It's one of my old collections. Many years ago, I found in southwest Turkey, in not that far from Antalya, I suppose, where there are many Phlomis species around. Very rich habitat for Phlomis. I'm a big fan of Phlomis. A lot of people diss Phlomis a bit. They get a bit bored of Phlomis fruticosa, I suppose. But there are a lot of good foliage plants within Phlomis, and bourgaei is definitely one of them. But it is variable. And like when you go to the wild, you know, the amount of genetic variation you always get in the wild is inspiring. And I have forms of this growing at home in my garden on the brashy Cotswold limestone on top of the hill there, and they love it up there. It's just like their home, really, except we have less sun and heat, but they do well up there. So I've got a form up there with very twisted, crinkled leaves, which is much yellower in the summer, in its summer foliage. But this one is this lovely combination, which you can't quite tell, I don't think, from the
you
camera
can
here.
at various angles, Nick. When you turn the shoot like that, you can actually see the rustiness coming through, the kind of orangey tan coming through on the grey as well.
and the kind of depth that gives, because you get those different tones.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad. It must be my screen then. That's good. So the flower color on this is also usually a richer, warmer yellow than fruticosa, shall we say, which is more like a sort of lemony yellow. And in some forms, there's sort of orangey marking on the flower as well, which really richens up the flower color. So I think a great foliage plant. And it's one of those ones that if you grow it hard, like I do at home, especially when you get a summer like 22, I didn't water anything up there in 22. And it was bone dry. It was like the Mediterranean up there. And these were loving it. But what you get with these, even when watered, to be honest, in the summer by rain or whatever, you get this distinction between winter foliage and summer foliage. So they've spent the last few weeks dumping a lot of their older, larger foliage and shrinking down to this smaller summer foliage. And when you get an extreme summer like 22, or you see them in the wild, they depending on time of year you see them, of course. But when I was out there originally, it would have been something like September. And all the summer foliage is all you see. All that winter foliage is long gone, and it's an extreme version of this. Even some of these would have gone. So you end up with a sort of skeletal amount of foliage, which is shrunken down and twisted and really hairy and colourful. So once it's established, you shouldn't worry about any watering at all, and then you'll get that even better foliage. So that's Phlomis bourgaei.
Out of interest, and I suppose it goes back to drainage again, but if you end up with a year like the one we've had, how are they coping with all of the rain?
To be honest, I've got these on the bed outside here on the nursery, and they get irrigated like everything else, and they don't care. I mean, it's worth saying. I'm just trying to remember. In 22, I would have had some on the nursery and watered them then, and they didn't care. It's often to do with Mediterranean plants. Is some can be sensitive when you have high temperatures and you water them. Say in California, there are certain trees and plants or whatever, certainly woody shrubs, woody things. I know that they can't water in summer because they just die because of their higher temperatures. Whereas here, I think especially night temperatures are always low enough, even in the hot summer, that it makes it so plants don't freak out and die off. So yeah, I've never had any trouble with these at all. And to be honest, in say in the ground, they just think it's more like spring where they come from, and they're thinking, oh great, let's not drop so much of the winter foliage. So I think my plants at home probably do have a bit more foliage, but they do naturally dump a certain amount of foliage anyway, even with water, which is what you want them to do anyway, because you want to see that more concentrated color and form.
Yeah, we like that. That sounds like a win-win-win.
Yeah. So what else have we got? Another woody. This is Lindera obtusiloba, which is an old classic, really, but is not often sold, not often offered. So it's a Lindera. So it's a large shrub from the Far East. Forms of it actually go right across China into the Himalayas, actually. So this is a large shrub you're mainly growing for foliage effects. And I don't know if you can see nice veins, nice new growth color, but really you're growing this for the autumn color. The autumn color is fantastic, rich, buttery yellow, deep sort of, warm, bright yellow. And some forms of it could also have orange in the yellow as well. That might vary on where you're growing it as well, of course. Plenty of sun and your soil acidity, things like that can change things. But a great autumn coloring plant. Also, it has, especially on a decent size plant, you really do start to notice the flowering. So in spring, there are masses of these mustardy yellow little flowers in small heads all over the plants, and that's very early spring as well. You're into sort of March, I'd say, late March, maybe something like that. Before a lot of things are in flower, that's for sure. So good, both ends of the season, really good plant, really useful early flowers, excellent autumn color. But in the meantime, when you see this, you can't tell much from a young plant like this, but when you see a good specimen in the ground at this time of year, you think, oh, nice, good foliage, So it's a rather aristocratic, large, hardy shrub.
That'll do.
I've FLOMO'd over Lindera triloba before, because obviously it's similar, wonderful autumn colour. I do sort of wonder, why are these not more widely grown, the Linderas? They just seem to be such great garden-worthy plants.
Well, I think the probable reason is ease of propagation.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are rare Linderas that I've tried to grow, and I got my propagator to try and take cuttings from, and they do not want to go from cuttings. So I don't know about all Lindera, but certainly there are problems within certain species. And I would have thought various people would have tried to bulk this up in the past and found the same difficulty. But so if you find seed, that's your route in. But of course, you don't always find seeds, and with these, you need, I don't know whether are they dioica or, I think they can. I think what they need to probably do is cross-pollinate between. You need more than one clone because they need to out-cross. You see what I mean? They can't just pollinate themselves. So yeah, if you find good seed, you're away. And that triloba you're talking about, I know there's at least one good forming cultivation which does set seed on its own. You only need one clone. That's one of the Wyn Jones's collections. So again, very, very similar to triloba in many ways, actually. Very, very closely related. Many similar qualities. So,
oh, look at this.
Here's something completely different. Now, I really like this. This is a Taiwanese fern called Acystopteris taiwaniana. No problems working out where that's from. So this is incredibly delicate and finely divided fronds, and it's hardy as far as we know. And what do I write on the label about that? Yes, I think it is fully hardy actually. Very, very rarely grown, but should be. And it fills out well at the root, the rhizome. It doesn't run everywhere as far as I know at all, but healthily fills out. But I think it should be grown more. I see strangely little interest from customers here, apart from fern nerds, and I think, why? when I first had this, I thought, wow, that's going to sell well. That's a beautiful fern, but as a nurseryman, it's often quite difficult to know why some things don't sell well.
Well, that seems really eye-catching. Does it need much moisture, or is it a dry-tolerant fern?
I wouldn't say it's drought tolerant, not considering where it comes from. I mean, Taiwan is not a dry place. I don't think anywhere in the summer. Maybe on a cliff somewhere. It's not as wet, but they have a good bit of moisture in the summer in Taiwan. So no, I would give this even moisture throughout the summer. Winter not so important, but
yeah,
I don't think we have dry winters in Britain, do we? Don't think we need to talk about that. So that's Acystopteris taiwaniana. Let's make it popular.
Yeah, sorry? Let's. I think it's marvelous. I think we need to make it popular. I think more people need that.
Indeed. Let's have another herbaceous plant, and this ties in really well, Alan, to what we were talking about earlier on. This is not in flower yet. It's too early in the season, but this is a Hedychium. But this is a new Hedychium, which I've named recently. I don't know if you have this in your trial, actually, or not.
Probably not.
You probably need it. This is a really good form of Hedychium gardnerianum, the classic gardnerianum with its fabulous flowers and fabulous scent and excellent foliage. But this one is one we found many years ago when we used to go out traveling the world. We found this in Manipur, northeast India, in the middle of nowhere, right up near the border of Burma, Myanmar. And when we found it in the wild, we didn't instantly recognize it as Hedychium gardnerianum, because it was, you can't really see because of the dusty kind of mess on the foliage from the irrigation system. But the foliage was very shiny, and the stems were covered in a really good layer of this white, I don't know if you can see that, this white farina. And the underside of the leaves too. I thought, wow, ooh, what's this species? And then later on, we grew it in cultivation, and we realized, oh, it is a form of gardnerianum, but it's a very good form of gardnerianum.
Have you named it now?
Yeah, I have named it. Thanks for reminding me to say that. I named it after the local people. I named it Tangkhul Naga, after the Tangkhul Naga tribe. It's one of the Naga tribes of northeast India. I'm offering them on the website very soon. They're not quite ready to sell. I've been chopping up Hedychiums with my staff for weeks, but they're all coming online very, very soon with this extra warmth. So this is a really good form of gardnerianum, extra color in its stems and undersides of the leaves with the extra white farina. And the flower color tends to be paler as well. It's one of these, instead of a rich yellow, it's sort of like a pale, lighter yellow, which adds another area of a level of interest.
I just like this construction of that stem. I mean, the stem looks very robust.
Yeah.
And the way those leaves come off at an angle, almost at 45 degrees, it has presence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I totally
can see
agree.
what attracted you to it.
Yeah. The funny thing was, when we found it in the wild, it was growing almost sideways out of a bank. and all the leaves were going the other way. But yeah, in the nursery or in the ground here, growing on the level, it does have real presence. I agree. But I also had before Brexit ruined everything for most people, especially me. There was a German guy who bought a plant from me. I used to sell all across Europe, and a German chap had bought Hedychiums from me, and he had this from me. I didn't think I even sold it in those days. Maybe I did. He had a plant of this from me, and he rang me last year. He lives, I think, full time. Maybe he's retired to Mallorca now, and he lives in Mallorca certainly part of the year or whatever. And he said, "Nick, this Hedychium you sold me, it's incredible. It's like a new species, yeah." It's like, well, I don't think it's a new species. I think it's gardnerianum. He said, "Oh, it's so different. It's amazing. I grow like 100 different Hedychium. It's amazing." Like, well, I mean, great. Thanks for the feedback. It was really interesting to hear someone who grew so many in a good warm climate like Mallorca, no doubt heavily watered there, but it was really good to hear that he thought it was so distinct, because sometimes the differences are not as obvious under cultivation here as they would be maybe somewhere else. So it's good to hear that. So I think I'm justified in naming it.
Oh, the FLOMO off
Indeed.
this episode is going to be insane. But before we move on to that, what is this like stem that's wafting around behind your head that I can see?
This one here?
Yeah.
Let's get that one out. This is a climber with a yellow leaf. Let's get rid of that. This is a climber. It's been around a long time, but as I was wandering around this morning, without much time,
Dregea?
it was similar looking, but not quite.
Scented?
Who? Oh, how about
Scented.
that? Scented. Oh, yes, very scented. It's got this amazing sweet scent, sort of cloves, clove sweet.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, spicy sweet. And these leaves are leathery, evergreen, softly hairy on the underside there, just slightly. But these flowers are, nice. That is gorgeous. Is it even cloves? I don't even know what it is, actually. Some lovely, lovely scents. There's some more there. You can see this is Marsdenia oreophila, which you probably grow. But it has a similarity in a way visually to Dregea. I know exactly what you mean. But yeah, an evergreen climate with a real sort of tropical look, if you ask me. When you grow this well, it gets pretty large, a decent sized climber.
It's quite nice that it flowers later in the second half, probably of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just pumping them out now. We got flower buds here. These are open. More going up the stem. There's in bud here. Look. Yeah. Great thing. Now I was always led to believe, many years ago, that Marsdenia oreophila was not very hardy, and then I started getting reports back from customers. The great thing about being a nurseryman, a retail nurseryman, is you talk to a lot of gardeners, and you get this amazing feedback, and you think, "Oh, sorry, you're growing it in Worcestershire? Interesting. Did it survive 2009-10? It did survive 2009. Wow, that's good. That's good ammunition for any doubters who might say, "Oh, but that's tender. I can't grow that." Well, maybe you can grow it. So, I mean, saying that, I tried it here in my terrible hellhole frostbug, and it did die. I think that was those terrible winters of 2009-10. But on the whole, definitely worth a go. This one, large growing evergreen climate, can of course be kept smaller by judicious pruning. But yeah, I mean, another customer of mine had it in a long time ago from me, and he grew it in Bristol, central Bristol, in Clifton, lovely Clifton.
I remember this now because I remember you telling me this tale.
Good
And
stuff.
I did buy this, and I have got it, and I've got it growing through a holly tree.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Did it, and it does well, yeah?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
So what was the
Excellent.
tale of Clifton that got Alan to buy it?
Oh, I mean, it's not a terribly exciting tale, but he did come back after like a couple of years and just said and told me it had covered his entire house basically. I mean, he had to tie it in obviously on the brickwork, but yeah, it had grown incredibly vigorously. And of course, somewhere like Clifton, you haven't got to worry about coal anyway. Urban heat island, southwestish city, you know, it was always likely to do well there anyway. But as we've found since, especially with my customers in Worcestershire, etc., people don't find it that tender anyway. So Marsdenia oreophila. This is the lovely thing. Can you see that?
Yes, look
Yeah.
at that.
Have you had this from me, Alan?
I don't know, what is it?
It's a dahlia.
The Dahlia.
But look at that foliage.
Wow.
This is an interesting thing. This is one I found in Mexico many years ago, 2005. I was with a friend in northeast Mexico at the time. We went into a new area that had been opened up. I don't know if it was forestry or what, logging, or I don't know. It had been turned into a reserve actually, and we pushed up this dirt track into the mountains, just about getting up the track. Forded a small river about 7 times, I think, back and forth before we started climbing up and up and up and up. Such are the joys of plant hunting, and we found where we decided to stop and turn back, because it was getting late evening and yeah, getting a bit hairy under the wheels, as it were. We found this dahlia was by the side of the road, and I wasn't particularly into dahlias at the time, but a friend of mine at the time was obsessed in them, and I'm just going to put that down. And I thought, oh, I'll just collect a tiny pinch of seed to bring back with me. And so basically, to cut a long story short, a couple of years later, we're growing it in the ground in the UK, and it looks pretty exciting. And we're thinking it's this species, but it doesn't quite fit. I think we were calling it Pteropoda at the time or something like that. Didn't quite fit that species, but you know, maybe we'll work it out one day. Anyway, so I then struck up some correspondence with a German botanist. I think he may have been from Hamburg Botanic Garden or somewhere like that, and he was swapping little plants with me from our gardens or whatever. And the subject of dahlias came up one day, and it turned out he knew. I think he'd been to Mexico many times and had seen all the species in the wild. And I thought, oh, let me show you some pictures of this one that we found in the wild. And so I went to the garden where my plant was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more impressive every year. And I cut stems and leaves and I photographed them. And he said, this is new. There's nothing like this. This is completely distinct. And I thought, is it? Great. Wow.
I'm beginning to like it more and more.
Yeah. And there's something very distinct about the stem. So I don't know how many have this. Can you see that fluting on the stem? Wonderful grooves. And what I've noticed about this in the garden, not that I'm on a sort of windy hilltop here, but sometimes you get squalls coming in, and you know all the plants are blown over. And I even lost a tree once in the garden in a summer squall. So it's not like it's without wind. But this dahlia has never blown a stem out, and that's quite unusual for a dahlia. I mean, dahlias, you know what they're like. They can
get wrecked.
They can get wrecked. Whereas this plant has never had a stem break out. And I looked at that fluting on the stem. And I thought, is that a particularly strong stem? Is there something? I'm not an engineer, but you know that maybe that's a very strong stem. I don't know. But it turned out, to cut a long story short, or to cut a long story long, it turned out to be a new species. He sent the location details and photographs to Mexican botanist friends of his, and then finally, after many years, they I don't know how many years it was getting boring after a while. 3 or 4 years later, they finally came up with a description for this new dahlia species and called it Dahlia tamaulipana, after the Mexican state of Tamaulipas. And I got a tiny mention right at the bottom of the paper, right at the bottom of the acknowledgements, which I wasn't that pleased with, but such is life. Unless you describe these things yourself, you know.
Does tamaulipana, does it flower in this country?
Good question. That's a very good question. I forgot to say that. I was getting too excited about the discovery story there. So it does flower, yes, but it depends entirely on the conditions at the time, as in it flowers really late. So, you know, Imperialis, the giant monster that likes to flower in the middle of December or something like that, or late December. This is similar. So this has flowered here before mid-December. So I flowered it at least 3 times before frost. But I'm not in the best location, really.
Yeah.
But there was one year when everything was early. I don't know if you remember that, sort of 10 years ago or maybe more. Everything was early. Everything was about a month early, and it carried right through the year, and it flowered in mid-November, which was an amazing change. But but generally it's mid-December.
Now the flowers typically mauve.
Well, they are bluey pink.
Yeah,
actually, they're on the mauvey side of pink. I would say, and they're a reasonable size, and they're very well, a classic sort of wild dahlia, I suppose, in many ways. But they have a little yellow star in the middle as well, at the base of each petal, and a sort of circular yellow center. And they reach right above the foliage. The foliage is you know, mainly what I grow it for. It's this great mound of bigger than these. Bigger than I just showed you, this young plant. The big leaves, great mound, foliage right to the ground as well. So it's excellently clothed, unlike most dahlias. But when it flowers, it will go to about 2.5 meters tall. Not as tall as an imperialis, but big.
Big enough for most people.
Well, I would say so. I would say so. And it's completely hardy. It's been in the ground. My clump has been in the ground for, I don't even know how long. It would have been in the ground from something like 2007 onwards. Went through all the terrible winters. I used to mulch it in those days because I was worried about the extreme cold. Never mulched it since. It's firmly entrenched, and it's never going to die from cold. In fact, where it comes from is the coldest part of Mexico, northeast. And I don't know if I'm right in saying, but it may be the most northerly growing wild dahlia in the world, perhaps. Not sure. But maybe that says something about its hardiness. This is an avocado relative. So it's a Persea. It's a hardy Persea. So not Persea americana like the avocado, but this is easily growable, certainly across the whole southern UK. I don't mean mild UK. I mean, you know, inland southern UK, maybe further north as well. So this is Persea bracteata. And this formed a small tree, evergreen, lovely. You see that red new foliage?
Gorgeous.
And the undersides, I don't know if you can pick this up. They're a sort of grey, bluey grey green, but just a lovely foliage plants. And the rarity value is 10 out of 10 on this one.
Lovely texture about it.
Lovely texture. But I do like to push the point about why not have a beautiful plant which is also botanically really interesting, and it's very likely that you really won't see anywhere else as well. So I mean, that ticks all the boxes to me.
And me.
Good. So that's
I'd say
Persea.
and me, but currently I always feel like everything in my plot is in peril from either neglect, a toddler, or a dog. So not so much for me right now, but hopefully once again in my life in the coming years.
Yes, it will come again. What else have we got? This is let's do this one. This is a Lagerstroemia. A Lagerstroemia that I found in Taiwan once upon a time. So Lagerstroemias, people, do you grow and eat Lagerstroemias?
I've tried twice and they got frosted both times. do
you know which ones you tried?
One was a dwarf one with very dark leaves and very red flowers. That got killed in the first winter.
Cedar Lane Red,
Could be.
maybe.
Mm.
There are quite a few, to be honest. There's loads of forms of indica. That's interesting. You can't grow indica well. I would experiment more, even with indica, which can be fussy and needing of heat to ripen.
Yeah.
Saying that, there are forms of indica growing in right on the coast of I was at, where was it? Colton Fishacre, that lovely garden, that National Trust garden in Devon the other day, and there was a really good specimen. Probably never flowers there in its cool coastal climate.
There was a plant of it growing in Morris Mason's garden in West Norfolk. When he died, unfortunately the garden got mashed up, but there were some frames left behind, and there was a tray of seedlings in this frame, and it rooted at the base of the frame. There's no top on the frame, and that was a very good dark pink Lagerstroemia.
And did it flower well?
Yeah, it
Interesting. Yeah, these proven good flowering forms of indica in Britain are worth propagating, because some forms of indica don't flower that well in Britain. They will do with climate change. They'll become probably quite common, and they're being planted around London, and etc. So like I was saying, sometimes you do find specimens in quite cool gardens, like coastal Devon, like I was just saying, and they're doing really well, and they look fantastic, and the bark is gorgeous. The one at in Devon I was just mentioning is about, I don't know, 15, 20 feet tall. It looked great. The foliage was all red tinged, but much like this one, this one here. I don't know if you can see that. I probably can't see it, but it is. It's red tinged. So they have really good qualities anyway. But I'm not even talking here about Lagerstroemia indica. This one is Lagerstroemia subcostata, which is a more growable species for us. And subcostata has greater hardiness, apparently, than indica. And while it is sensitive to perhaps growing a little bit late in the season, being a bit soft when frosts come, and perhaps having a nip back every now and again, I've got very little experience of it here, apart from December 22, which was a terribly nasty early bit of cold. And my young plant of this that I planted in the garden here was nipped back a bit, but it bounced straight back again the next year. It only had tip damage. But the real joy of Lagerstroemia subcostata is the bark. The bark is to die for. It's fabulous. It depends which exact seedling you're looking at, and if you walk through the forests of Taiwan, all over the place you'll find Lagerstroemia subcostata, and they shine out like beacons in the forest with their gorgeous stems of flaking bark. And they flake in different ways. They can flake in big peelings, as it were, or little itsy bitsies all over. The autumn color on these is fantastic. All my Lagerstroemias at the nursery, of which I grow various different forms, hybrids and species, they all go oranges, scarlets, a little bit of yellow, maybe, mainly orange and scarlet. Really lovely. So I think they are a plant of the future. And there are also hybrids of subcostata and the old indica, which again are much easier to grow, that were created in the US quite a few years ago. So they, especially with climate change, extra heat in the summers, maybe not at the moment, but look at 2022. There's more coming. Drought tolerance. They're definitely for us, I think.
You've given us so many plants for the future today. I mean, the FLOMO's off the scale. I don't even know how many FLOMOs Alan has, just from what you've talked about today. It's kind of mad. And before a small toddler does come running in, I can hear he's been playing with his little lawnmower. Clearly not his mother's child if he's got a lawnmower, but anyway, running up and down the path. So before that happens in this room where we're recording, I better move on to FLOMO, which, if you've never caught one of these podcasts before, is that fear of missing out you get about a flower or a plant. I actually came into this with something from your Instagram. It's not technically kind of this moment plant, but something for later in the season, which is a kind of Isodon plectranthus thing, a Fusus var longitubus, the kind of colour that when I scroll through an Instagram, I just go, dark purpley bluey flowers. Yes, yes, yes. And lovely little tubes. I am a sucker for a tubular flower anyway. And then it seemed to be this kind of mid-late autumn flower and hardy and shade tolerant and all these things, which just sounded like marvelous. So that's the Flomo I brought to the party. Clearly something that you're passionate about because it was on your Instagram, Nick.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous thing. I mean, for all the reasons you just mentioned, and that's a particularly good clone I got, which I think ought to be named because it again, if you did a bit of internet searching, you would see that not all specimens of that species or variety are that color. There are lots that are paler blue. So this really rich blue needs a cultivar name, really. But it's the way it flowers in autumn. You know, when virtually everything else is over, that's popping its flowers out, and it's a lovely, lovely thing.
And I've got it from you too.
Oh, excellent!
Of course you have.
Excellent.
Where are you at with your Flomo, Nick?
Me, God, I couldn't even think of one. No, honestly,
got time for this.
I've got so many plants. I couldn't even think of something I need. You know what I mean? I'm so satiated. I mean, does that sound?
Okay, can
like
I ask you then, for when you've been out plant hunting, and I don't know what your most recent trip was, is there ever anything that you've wanted to be able to grow, but you haven't managed to get the seed to take? Is there something that you wanted to bring back and it never quite happened?
Oh, quite a few times. Yeah, there are things where you think, oh, look at this. There's no seed on the whole area. You can't find seed of anything. I mean, we found in Cyprus once we found the good old golden oak of Cyprus, which is an endemic of Cyprus, a shrubby oak, dark green leaves. Undersides of the leaves are absolutely golden yellow, rich, sort of warm yellow. Not too dissimilar to Alan's shirt there, actually. That sort of rich, deep. I don't know, mustardy,
Mustard.
golden. Yes, yeah, that'll do. And there was not a seed to be found on the whole island, I don't think. Yeah, there are so many examples of that. I can't remember any more, to be honest. There's so many.
All these things that we could have had, all that we could have won. Alan, dare I
Yes.
even ask where you're at with your Flomo?
I wouldn't bother if I were you, but there is one thing, nothing that hasn't been mentioned today that I want to get. I've had it before and I've lost it, but it's Dendromicum rigida, the tree poppy.
Yeah, nice. I sell that sometimes.
You haven't got it at the moment.
No, it's very hard to propagate.
I know.
that is one of those things that is not easy to propagate. And I think it likes a bit of drainage.
Yeah,
around the root. I think drainage around the roots, around root collar even is really important. I tried one here right against the wall, and I found after a year or so it just rotted off. And I thought, what? I mean, a reasonably drained soil right against the south wall. Didn't like it at all. So I think maybe next time, Alan, I wouldn't worry so much about putting it against the wall, rather than putting it in your desert wash or somewhere like that with a whole load of gravel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Just pull the gravel back, plonk it on the surface of the soil, push the gravel back around the root ball, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Water it until it gets established and then just leave it alone. That's
nice
what I
tip.
recommend.
Yeah.
If you can get hold of one.
If I can get hold of it.
Hopefully go. I don't think I have it on the website at the moment. Normally there'd be a thing on the website. If it's out of stock, you could put your details in for a notification.
I'll have a look.
I don't think it's on there, to be honest. So
all right,
You need to be patient then.
I'll try and remember. If I have another one day, I'll try and remember to let you know.
Okay.
Nick, this has been just as much fun as I anticipated. My cheeks hurt from all of the smiling each time you brought a plant out. It's like another amazing thing. Thank you so much. We talked beforehand, or maybe we'll go out and look, which we really want to do. So I think there's a whole other episode. Just come back and we'll head out and we'll have a look at everything outside, because that's too exciting to miss.
That sounds great.
Until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Nice to join you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Any more?
Well, I don't want to miss out on anything amazing. That obviously it's all amazing, you know what I mean. But if there's anything that you really want to share, I don't want to miss it. But equally, there is possibly going to be a small toddler rampaging into this room in a a matter of time.
That's fine. I like toddlers. You've probably heard of Nagaland. And maybe the Naga chili. That's one of the hottest
I've
chilies.
heard of Naga Manchetti.
Ah, well, not quite the same. Not your average specimen in the garden.
I feel like we peaked too soon. This is like the highlight of your life. Where can we possibly go from that?
Well, maybe oh God, I've ruined everything. Next.